80% ya katiba iliyoko sasa ni nzuri. 20% ndio mbaya. Hata ile ya Bomas, 80% ile ya Bomas ilikuwa nzuri. Kwa hivyo mimi ninauliza, kama imesemekana na Vice President jana alisema mwenyewe ya kwamba 20% ya hii katiba ni mbaya, mbona wasikubali ya kwamba turudi kwa katiba ile wananchi wote waliandika ya Bomas of Kenya? Ati tunataka mambo hii irudishwe bunge, ati wabunge waende wazungumzie. Unaelewana? Mimi nawaambieni ya kwamba kupeleka katiba hii kwa wabunge kule bunge ni kama kumwambia mbuzi aende atafute haki kwa mahakama ya afisi. Atapata haki kweli? Katika mahakama ya afisi mimi nawauliza, mbuzi atapata haki?
All right, from the archives there, that is but then the Minister of Agriculture, right? William Samoei Ruto. And you're watching SOKONI, just to refresh your memory, if you can remember there. You can see that particular cup, right? You can identify the color. You can just tell which party he was on, and that, or he was in, that was ODM by then. Right, this is SOKONI. Yeah, there you are. I can see Gitura wants to comment on that. Maybe my director Justina may put on that particular, yes.
Not quite.
Look, the way this picture has been frozen, it looks very fierce and ferocious. Like her, mutaniona. Gituro.
I don't look at it, you know. But I think somebody once upon a time said that.
No, forget about what. If you dial back on this particular time, where were you? And what was the debate?
I think we were...
Just briefly.
It had something to do with the Constitution, if I remember. But the point I'm making, they say, don't believe the politician and don't go to bed with them.
Not all.
Because one day they're with you, the next day they're with somebody else. I think that's how I can summarize it.
Okay. Okay. Oh, fantastic.
You see, that was during the campaign,
right?
For the on the vote for the
it was the
new constitution.
The banana and whatever. Yes.
I was an executive member of ODM, so I was with this guy. Yeah, so
same old.
I was always in that team campaigning for the no and yes, for the no, I think. But I want to pick up from where he left.
Yes.
Where he said katika mahakama ya fisi mbuzi haiwezi kupata haki.
Right.
So kwa hii AmCham and all this American and the EPA.
Yes.
Right.
Kwa hiyo mahakama ya wazungu ni ngumu sana kupata haki. And I want to talk about these things.
Yes, the AmCham, yes.
First of all, I think in principle, we're all agreed that we need investors in the country. No one, I mean, there's no doubt. And the government has tried hard to create a business environment that will attract investors from all over the world to try and so that we can create jobs, we can create wealth in the country. That there's no doubt. However, I think every business or every business agreement that the government comes up with other countries, I think it's important to look at the details and see whether it benefits the country or it benefits the other countries.
Yes.
Because every nation pushes its own interests. Nobody pushes your interest. For a long time, countries in third world, particularly African countries, have had a wrong deal when it comes to, for example, the EPA, the Economic Partnership Agreement with Europe, for many years, which has been there. And so the concern is there that with this strategic, trade and investment partnership in the U.S., what does Kenya stand to gain? I think this is the concern. Today, I was just reading earlier on, the concern by the farmers, that some of the farmers have picked up that the finished goods, for example, chicken, the poultry farmers are really complaining that, if this thing is signed, the farmers, the poultry farmers in the country are going to lose big time. Because one of the things that would happen in these international business agreements, particularly with Europe and the US, is they will want to export finished goods. That is their main concern. And they want to import from you primary products. And I
Exactly.
I'll give you an example of the one on the EPA, because I wrote a very strong article on it a few months ago when it was passed. There's no doubt that the country, our agricultural products will get duty-free and quota-free access to Europe. That's no doubt. Our tea, our coffee, but mainly our horticulture products. That's the main focus, really. The government's main focus is on that. The taxes and tariffs will raise. About 100 million will save every year on taxes that would have paid on flowers and other horticultural products. But when you look at the concerns that other East African countries raised, and they had declined to sign that thing, but Kenya went ahead, instead of waiting for the other East African countries, they went ahead to sign. The removal of tariffs on up to 90% of the goods which will come from EU into Kenya is going to affect local manufacturers and businesses and industries. I'm telling you, this will happen over a period of time. It's up to 5,000, 6,000 products that will come in from EU. These guys always look at long term. You sign today, but they'll tell you, this is 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, but it will come in. So that is one of the major concerns. And then the free movement of labor. Here, our professionals is not reciprocal. So professionals will move in from EU for all kind of of jobs. But for you, your qualification or your professional whatever, you don't have that reciprocity. You cannot move into those countries. So then the massive subsidy on EU agricultural products, which has been a matter of WTO and many other organizations. It has been discussions for many years. They provide huge subsidies on their agricultural products. Absolutely. So you can't compete on their milk, on all the agricultural products. Even if they were to import all those agricultural products, you can't compete with them because their farmers are provided with huge subsidies. And it's a matter that many countries in the developed world has been pushing for many, many years. And then here we are talking of the South African community in terms of trade. We are talking of the EFTA, Africa, and then you are signing on something again, that will be inimical to the objectives of EFTA and EAC, because our largest trading partners really is in EAC. Yes. You want to expand to Africa. Now, once you sign on to those, it's going to undermine all that. And so this American one, that's my concern, that really our technocrats for a long time in government have not been able to look at the dotted lines really in these agreements. That's the concern. So that then these things don't benefit us, it benefits those businesses. That's why when you look at the topic, it talks about AI and climate and
renewable energy
and tech. These are all areas in which the US are giants. We are not at the same level. You can't compete. This is why these bilateral trade arrangements are normally very tricky, because you are not at the same level.
No.
You have one country that is so advanced. This is why Tanzania was having difficulty dealing with us, because they said you guys are a bit more. So that's the same challenge we are going to have when you are going into a bilateral trade agreement, and you have not, and our guys have not looked at that. So them, they will benefit. But the question you raised on whether our Kenyan businesses can take advantage, it's because it's going to be very difficult for me I will try to export things into the US. It's not easy. Absolutely. That's why that AGOA Obama came up with was an opportunity. But even that AGOA, the reason why we're only doing 20, 30 items out of 5,000-6,000 is because of the challenges. It's not easy. It's extremely difficult.
Restrictions, especially on quality and all.
On their restrictions.
Their conditions.
Their conditions are so many, you cannot actually compete. But here they will move in and do whatever they want. So that, I don't know whether it will address really the trade imbalance. But of course, for the government, the concern is bring investors, create employment. This is what the government is looking at.
But I wanted just to ask you, because when you're talking about the East African community, you're trying to, of course, shake into place as a community. There is a big challenge where we've seen us really going full steam ahead and signing these EPAs, and also signing this particular pact to the US. We were here also with Donald Trump, you remember, with Uhuru Kenyatta. It really caused uproar around us. People were saying, why is there no consultation? You mentioned we're not at par, so to speak. We rebased our economy, and we've done that. The rebasing, is it twice? I don't know.
Twice,
we've done it twice, and so we are not really at par. So, do you think bringing us back on this negotiating table, and we've rebased our economy, what are the dynamics in terms of because also they've been dragging their feet in coming up with these concessions or these negotiations between
I don't think
yeah?
NSE countries were dragging their feet. They raised concerns.
This is what Kenya was saying.
These are the concerns that I've just mentioned.
They
said, look,
members have been dragging their feet. So Kenya is...
Well, so they have been raising these concerns. They said, look, you guys, we cannot sign an EPA with Europe with this, because we are going to lose. Our businesses are going to lose. Our farmers are going to lose. We cannot. So for them, it's about the concern for their own local industries.
I don't think I can call it dragging their feet.
So it's not dragging their feet.
It's not dragging their feet.
This is
but
what
I think
Kenya was saying.
Kenya, yes. You know, the one important factor that we must bring into the equation. Kenya is, the other countries are considered LDC, least developed countries.
Yeah.
So they automatically qualify for quota-free and duty-free access to Europe. Kenya, because of that rebasing of the economy, and the former boss wanted us to be among the richest.
You bet.
And he said we are emerging middle, whatever. So we don't qualify for that.
Yes.
That is why we were desperate to sign this thing. If we didn't sign, then of course their flowers and their coffee and tea would not get.
Actually,
this was sort of a Brexit for us. The rebasing, yeah.
Yes.
I think.
Okay. I think it's. Is it you? Or sorry, it's okay.
Some of the points that Honorable Senator raises, he has even given some answers to them. You know, we can't treat East Africa, EAC, as our neighbors are all angels. I think one point he raises is that the rest, or some of the others being LDCs, and we in another category. Obviously, we playing in slightly different leagues. Should that be the case or not? That's another issue. But that be as it may, Debal, I think Honorable Senator also talks of self-interest. I'm not holding brief for government in this regard. While it's important to have African interest, it's important to have EAC interest, but above all, it's important to have Kenyan interest. I mean, every country gives self-interest. Talking of even our neighbor Tanzania, you know, I think our members in TZ keeps complaining. Why do they have every so often to pay, like, I don't know, is it $300 or $500 to renew residency permit, you know? So there are scales that are tilted against us, which I think need to be eased. But having said that, I think where I agree with both Patrick and Honorable Senator is that maybe our negotiators are not good enough when we go to the table to negotiate. Of course, everybody will try to make the best of the situation. The US negotiators will do it, the EU will do it. Why aren't our people also doing it? The other major problem that I know a number of companies that have attempted to come in keep citing behind the scenes is that we have an agreement, but when you arrive, somebody asks you, what is in it for me? You know, this briefcase that was being talked about, it kills a lot of opportunities for Kenyans when people put self ahead of the country and the businesses and the sectors that need to be involved. But I think our bad manners shouldn't be a reason for us not to reach out, because the question for me is, what's the alternative? The opportunity cost of not entering into some of these arrangements would be much higher. Let's only say that, can we bring in good hygiene into how we do business and negotiate well? Get the technocrats. Let's operate on the basis of meritocracy. Let's get our best. It's not that we don't have our best economists, technocrats to be on the table. As a matter of fact, our members in the US have repeatedly indicated to the Kenya government, when you are negotiating, let us be part of it, the negotiation, because we have loyalties on both sides. We are Kenyan American, so we'll make sure that interests of America are covered as much as interests of Kenya. And I think this is what President Biden did notice when he created this Presidential Executive Council. He said there's an opportunity. We have African Americans who are partly loyal to both sides, to Africa and to America. How can we take advantage of them? I think as Kenya government, we need to do a lot more in that regard. But let's not lose the opportunities.
Okay, from the optics, maybe I should ask as well, Professor Geturo Wainaina, should we also be seeing Kenya Chamber of Commerce on this particular? It should be, you know,
they were involved.
Yes. Okay, I just wanted to be clear that they were involved as well.
Yeah, but I want to go a point which Bill was raising, and it's a concern in terms of the trend, where if you look what Kenya is exporting to those countries, you're looking at coffee as beans, tea, horticulture. And what we are getting from those, one of the things is the grains. We get a lot of grains from those countries. And it's interesting, as much as coffee is cool, tea, you really can't eat coffee. You can't say, kids, today the meal is avocado. But, and a PS, about a month ago, a PS asked me, Wainaina, you are doing this work for arid and semi-arid lands. When did it come that we don't need this humanitarian food? And you all know, they will go to any strength to give subsidy to the farmers there. Who buys that food? The first person to buy that food is the UN. From Americans, from the European. And where do they get? WFP. Where does the WFP bring it? We are taking it to these areas which they are drought. So when we start seeing that narrative, and even when we looked at the Vision 20, it was, yes, the economic pillar. Let's turn this commodity into finished product and sell you that coffee. Right. Not the cocoa beans. We sell you that will make a lot of. And this thing, and perhaps we should share the video with you guys, the YouTube. Museveni elegantly brought how a kilo of Arabica tea costs in Uganda. When it comes back at the Java, how much it is? 200%. Is that a fair trade, really?
No.
And I like the way Bill started. Probably doing business more with the African countries will be more profitable than looking at EU than America, than Somali. Very clear. You come in, the 23 Trade Act is very clear what benefit you get from there. You won't get that from the EU, Americans. We have something on our doorstep. Forward back. Look at Magufuli. Comes in very clear. And I'm not sure whether Magufuli died because of COVID. How can a president die because of COVID?
You seem to have some information that
President Museveni
I don't know, but it's something to think about. Right. Magufuli came in. What the first thing he did? He touched Korocho. Sorry. He touched what? He touched
cashew nut.
Cashew nut.
It's called, okay.
What is it in Swahili?
I don't know.
Not Korosho. Korocho. Then he looked at gold. And it was very clear. We are not getting value for our money. The rest is history.
The rest is history.
It's not that easy. Fighting a war, which leads to, and a good example is our friend Arabia. You have to be prepared. So good having all this coming. It's all good signing these deals.
The thing with Europe, particularly the EPA, their focus is always on raw materials and primary products for their industries. That one is not negotiable.
Right.
That's what they want. And then they send you now the finished goods. So your tea goes as a raw material, and you get, tea bags here. That's the way this is what all these EPA agreements are always about. But the US, I think, generally, the investment by US in African countries has been on natural resources, mainly in mineral sector and so forth. But now I think the focus is on this area of, in this AmCham meeting, I think the area of climate,
green energy,
energy, on the area of tech,
digital.
So I think what the government's hopes are that after the president visited the Silicon Valley, last year, that people will come, they'll start investing here, putting up, plants that can employ people, and they can service the rest of Africa from here. It's not an easy thing, because when you come to talk about tech and AI, he'll tell you that there are better places to do it. That's why they're always in China and India and those places, for all their things are done in those countries. They get raw materials.
And to me, India provides a very good model. Watch India in the next 5 years. And if you look India, step back and say, let's look ourselves from within. Let's see what kind of vehicles are we doing? Are we food secure? And if you look at the GDP of India, it's probably going to be the next from China in terms of the economic performance. But they were very deliberate. They looked inwardly.
What we want is investments in the country. It's not loans. Me, my worry is the moment you become very cautious to the US in particular and so forth, you end up with huge loans of IMFs and World Banks, and those are the things they focus on. But what this country wants is not those things. It's investment.
Right.
Yes, and in infrastructure. That's the question that was being asked earlier. Why don't these guys put money into infrastructure? When I was in Parliament in 2006, you know that question of, then we had a meeting with the American ambassador, and we said, why don't you guys come and build roads and things, and everything is either built by Japanese, or Chinese, and nothing. There's nothing that you can say US built this bridge or this road or this hospital or this university. And then she told us, Bushnell, she told us, no, we don't do those things.
And you are spot on, Bill, because if you go to this developed economy,
I wanted just to butt in because you're talking about
India.
And I was putting for you, the economist, is asking how strong is India's economy, and also is unstoppable. This is how Narendra Modi is changing India and the world as well.
The ball even for Prime Minister Modi. Some Kenyans may be surprised that when he was still governor of, I think, Gujarati, one of his economic advisors on industrial parks was a Kenyan, Engineer Laban Nditi. So, Kenya has got talent that others utilize for their good. But I think I agree in terms of India's model in two major ways. One, India sent its human personnel to the US, like China did and Korea did, to acquire skills, and then repatriated them back. Some of them, a good number, still remained. Of course, if you were to take the top 100 US blue companies, maybe even 30% of them are led by Indians, Indian Americans in that regard. But equally, among the global leading blue chip companies, you'll find a number in India. So India did very well in that regard. Go acquire skills, improve on them, bring some of it back home, but continue to be a dominant actor. In the US, I think Nigeria has done much better than the other countries in terms of being mainstreamed in the US economy. One of the things we are doing at the moment is looking at senior Kenyans who are in major corporate America, major corporate UK, because we need to work with them. But where I agree with my colleagues is, as a country, we must emphasize value addition. The good thing is that there are investors, even from the countries we are talking about, willing to do that. We just need to get the right partnerships and then put national interest of a society is beyond of personal interest. So in terms of when you negotiate, the other party, if you find the best it can exploit, they obviously would. Even if the tables were turned, Kenya would do the same. Right. So
I want to bring at the areas of where you invest. I was yesterday interesting news. If you look at the most in April, there's an airport in the US. It had 15.2 million passengers in 1 month.
Right. Sure.
If you go to these developed economies, and some of you have, the first thing they work is their infrastructure. You decide, am I taking a train? Am I taking an aircraft or a road? And that's a key area. If the economies have to grow, then that infrastructure area. And you look in terms of all that infrastructure, be it historical, had to do with a lot of resources from Africa, which actually went to develop those infrastructure in those countries. So if as African nations, we must step back, the good must go to the market. And I was shocked that there's a Jackview in Atlanta.
Right.
15.2 million passengers in 1 month. So you can imagine, that's business.
Yeah. If I may chime in on infrastructure, just briefly, Debal, I remember about 8 years ago, China had the biggest investment in infrastructure. One single project. In DRC, I think they put in about $5 or $6 billion for infrastructure. I think then it was followed by Ethiopia in telecom, where they had put in $1.5 billion. But I think my little sixth sense tells me that the West seems to be also doing catch up, which is not bad for us. I think we just need to put our act right and put our hands where our mouths are. I think for me, focusing on production, value addition, processing of our primary goods locally, the manufacturing sector and industrialization, powered with technology, digital technology, is the way to go. Some of the US companies are talking of establishing data centers here. The energy that you'd require, and Kenya is leading in green energy, not only in the region, but globally. Why don't we take advantage of that to realize the ideals of local production and using cutting-edge technology?
Right, thank you. We just want to move the needle a bit higher right now and focus also on the money markets, where some 20 foreign institutional investors exited the Nairobi Securities Exchange in the first 3 months of 2024. New data shows mirroring continued bearish sentiment by foreigners on local stocks. Fresh data from the Capital Markets Authority, the number of foreign corporate investors at the NSE fell to 412 in the first quarter of the year from 432 at the end of December 2023. Institutional investors, large entities such as pension funds, hedge funds, and insurance companies that hire finance and investment professionals to manage large sums of money on behalf of the clients or members. The exit of the offshore institutional investors, however, came against an increase in trading activity at the NSE and a general rise in share prices across the quarter. Equity turnover in the 3 months, for instance, rose by 61.56% from the previous quarter, reaching 19.07 billion shillings from 118 billion shillings. During the same period, the Nairobi All Shares Index rose by 22.78% to close at 113.09 points from 92.11 points, while the NSE market's capitalization was up by a similar margin, closing at 1.76 trillion shillings. Combined foreign investors remain net sellers, deposing 2.2 billion shillings worth of NSE stocks in 3 months. The continued exit of foreigners in the opening stint of the 2024 came against the expected return of big-ticket foreign institutional investors. In March, for instance, Central Bank of Kenya Governor Kamau Thuke revealed that BlackRock Assets Managers, the world's largest fund manager by asset size, had picked Kenya among the 10 economies they had selected to invest in. And yes, just look at the NSE outlook, and I wanted just to juxtapose this particular news there with what is on the front page of the Business Daily today. Bill Okero, and we can begin with you, especially on the banks, pension funds blocked from juicy infrastructure bonds. What does this really portend moving forward? Treasury miles restricting bonds to retail investors. Analysts warn of reduced uptake. What do you think? By the way, when this is happening, we have also the betting companies. There's a flash of interest from the betting companies. 21 of them also are coming to Kenya, despite the tight tax regime.
Interesting.
Well, I think I do not know exactly why the government is doing so, but I think you are looking at a situation where you want to spur. There is a concern that most of the government, financial instruments are generally taken up by the banks, right, and other, these institutional investors, like pension funds and so forth. And I think because of that limitation, their demand for more and more yield, more and more, profits or interest on that has really raised it, made it very, very expensive for the government. So maybe I get the feeling that the government wants to expand or broaden the customer base for their product, for their instruments, so that I think there are other, like retail investors and others. So I think it should be probably a way of trying to reducing the, expanding at the same time, so that it can, when there's more interest from a larger base, then probably then they can also try and reduce the amount of the yield or the interest on these bonds. But I think I don't know. The main sectors that have that kind of money for the uptake of this is generally the banks and the pension funds and other institutional investors like this one. So I don't know whether they will be able to get sufficient clients or customers who will take up the whole amount if they exclude these people. But I think that should be the reason why the government is probably trying to pursue that. That, in my view, I don't know.
Right.
Isn't that what everyone has been crying for? So we've been crying here.
Yeah.
Why?
True,
the banks are here, institutions are borrowing there. We have the pension funds. They have all these huge eye-popping figures that they're investing, but also what you normally get as an interest to your pension is very dismal. Can we also be looking at that? How justifiable is that? Because this is all collectively money of Kenyans, investors there. At the end of the day. So when this is happening again, now we're saying, oh, we wonder if there will be an uptake again. And everyone will be
the bad is it's like Kenyans on the one moment we are crying and praying God so that we have rains.
Yes. Then we are cursing again.
But that be as it may, the ball, I think it's true. One person who has been a bit nervous, particularly in the past when a senior government officer in a private conversation said he didn't see anything wrong with the foreign 70% of the assets at Nairobi Stock Exchange being foreign owned. And for me, I had my reservations. I was saying either something is wrong with me, not to think that I wouldn't have minded if he said like 50-50 foreign owned, because I also recognize Kenya is part of a community, of global community of nations. But so getting Kenyans domestic to own assets at the stock exchange, I think is a good way to go. But I'm also like the fact that Kenya is a free market, the BAL. So completely edging out institutional investors, I think would run into whirlwinds if we were to try to go that route. But a way to encourage more retail investors and diaspora investors. Of course, remember, the banks, even though Mheshimiwa says the banks have the capacity, I think going by what diasporas remit, I think is pretty close to what the financial institutions are able to bring on the table when it comes to buying assets at the stock exchange. And by declaring interest, the BAL, we are working with the Nairobi Securities Exchange to evolve products suited to diaspora. But I'm not mandated to talk about it. It's still early days of the conversation to look at what would be appropriate. One of the problems, I think government has in the past rolled out diaspora bonds. A problem that we often make, and I see a bit of that happening now with government going round, particularly a State Department going round countries issuing diaspora with the IDs. And I keep asking, who mentioned to this department that this is the most important thing diasporas need? So sometimes it's good to involve what we call the shoe wearers, find out what's best, involve them in making decisions. But yes, edging out institutional investments and pension funds or reducing their participation in infrastructure bonds is a good way to go. It may also allow, actually, make more resources available to SMEs, because we do know that from experience, the financial institutions, instead of loaning out to SMEs that are risky, they would rather buy the infrastructure bonds. So government will kill two birds with one stone in that regard, but it's got to be done in a measured manner, in my view.
Right. Gituro, as we wind up, we want also to go to Zimbabwe. We was talking about the gold. Someone was talking, even Gituro was talking about gold.
The currency they have
the
gone
currency,
into.
indeed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think there's one thing perhaps to emphasize on the issue of domestic borrowing, really. That's what we're really saying. So instead of really focusing on FDIs, which you see a statement like that, I like the statement, 20 free NSE. which we have said here before, NSE is a very good barometer of how the economy is performing.
Sure.
But you being a local, domestic mobilization like pension fund, the SACCOs, I'm going nowhere. And what you're doing at the end of the day, if you look at the back end of this, what is really, if Shem and I, who have these funds in this pension, you're getting nothing out of it. And you're asking a very good fundamental demand you asked from the world. They benefit from this. Do we see this in terms of what I get?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, that's another narrative we can look at.
True.
But there's more opportunities for mobilizing the domestic investment.
Right.
And it goes to, you look at the two really institutions, the World Bank and IMF. They would really like you to be not happy that if you are mobilizing more local investment.
Sure.
And there's a lot. If you look at the Mwalimu Sacco, you look at the
Police Sacco,
Police
Harambee
Sacco,
Sacco.
yes, Matatu Sacco and all that.
Right.
RBA.
Sure.
There's a lot of we can borrow.
Sure.
I think, and the moment you're really giving this kind of blocking them, you're really saying idle capital. As the data in the business 24, this revenue road board has 201 billion idle capital, idle cash.
Sure.
And as much as cash is king, but that is a lot of idle cash you have. It should be invested somewhere. And some of the areas like
maybe just to add to what Prof was talking about, unclaimed financial assets.
Absolutely.
I think he's sitting on about 40-50 billion shillings. You know, almost like dead capital. We need to come up with mechanism to
this
support
is why we should be borrowing.
To support that money.
Yeah, because I was even wondering, still on investment, if you have 50 billion shillings, it's not sitting idle in some account, of course.
Sure.
So we want to know also the 50 billion shillings that the Unclaimed Asset Authority is accruing maybe in some fixed account, if there is any. Yes. What is where does this interest go to?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If we do some proper
for now, I wouldn't talk for unclaimed financial assets, but we've worked closely with them. I would want to believe that the current law ties their hands quite a bit, and I do know that the management have been kind of requesting for regulations to be put in place to allow them to utilize the resources better. But I must compliment them. They are one body that has been also going out to reach out to the diasporas to access their idle financial assets. Indeed. In fact, often we say many companies go out looking for people to give them money. This is one of the few, probably the only one.
Come and take your money.
Come and take your money. We have your money.
You should
the last time I also saw we have one or two politicians they've not claimed the assets there. Kalonzo Musyoka was one of them.
You should see the history how we started it.
Okay.
With somebody called Joe Gigi.
All right.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know. We shall discuss that, I think, in an hour. But I wanted just to go to...
While on that, one thing that we need some innovativeness.
Because of interest of time. We want just to go to where the president was in Zimbabwe. And he hailed Zimbabwe's gold-backed currency as a potential driver of economic recovery in Southern African nation. The introduction of the so-called ZiG demonstrated the authorities' commitment to reviving the country's economic fortunes despite a host of setbacks and pressures. Ruto told delegates gathered at an international trade fair over which he officiated in Zimbabwe's second biggest city of Bulawayo. President William Ruto hailed Zimbabwe's gold-backed currency as a potential driver of economic recovery in the Southern African nation. The introduction of the ZiG, as I think I'm repeating myself, is a big boost for that particular nation. But we want to see, will it make any discernible difference in light of where Zimbabwe is coming from? This is not the first time we're hearing about your currency being backed by gold. We had Libya on this as well, and we know what really happened to Muammar Gaddafi. Is it a dicey place to be, even as we consider also closing remarks? Shemo Chodo.
Incidentally, some people say that a certain county in Kenya, has got more gold resources than the whole of Zimbabwe. I don't know how true it is. But
don't mention it. We might all go there.
We're going to buy land.
Now we also have
what is happening in
Colton in about 5-6 other counties that's used for making smartphones and tablets. So yes, the responsible use of these natural resources, I think, is a way to go. I do know there are proposals to look into an African bullion bank which would be backed by resources underground. You recall a few months ago here we were talking about the Lumi. The team has been in town, and I'm hoping that government will find a way to lead the way in that regard in terms of easing business, particularly cross-border. Maybe I still marvel at why Uganda can't pay us with Uganda shillings when we buy, and we pay them with Kenya shillings when we buy. I think that's really, in my view, the way that we need to go to promote promote cross-border and intra-African trade. But the ball in the same vein, will I have a chance to say my final word? Or
yeah, we should give you your final word right now.
Yeah, the ball, we can't fail to record our empathies and condolences to those who have perished in Maiwa and other parts of the country during this problematic time. The trouble is the rains, the waters that are here. Can't we come up with mechanisms to harvest it and use it during dry seasons? Mm-hmm. I think it's a failure, not just in the current regime, but even previous regimes. It's a whole lot of resource that we should be utilizing.
Right.
That's what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. I go by the same, maybe. I think it's very fundamental to recognize that. But in terms of, and I hope the president and the team enjoyed the Musa Itunya Falls, because Bulawayo faces them.
Right.
It's
Musa Itunya.
Yes, it's the best way you can see the Victoria Falls from the Zim side.
So it's called Musa Itunya.
Yes. Thirda.
Musa Itunya Thirda.
Yes, it has something to do with Thirda.
All right.
And the fundamentals in Zim are not okay. So whether you bring gold or this, I don't see it going far. Mm-hmm. We have seen how the BRICS wanted to come with the currency. So the dollar will still be. Mm-hmm. And I don't see the gold is a way out of it. My last shot is particularly with the Shem. And I think we need to, as we step back, we pray for these people who have lost their lives, their families. When each one of us are sleeping in one bed, there are people who actually have nowhere to sleep. Right. So let's reach out. There are fellow people of this country. If you have some clothes, if you have some cash, you can. Let's support you. But the most fundamental, what are we learning?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's a fundamental thing we have to take home. Mm-hmm. What is it we are learning from these floods? And I think I remember, I go back to Raila Odinga. He said one time, we are like in Gere, a water. Yeah? Okay. It's chased by a lion. When don't see the lion, they start eating.
Right.
We forget. Soon, in June, July, we'll forget there were floods.
Right.
The drought will kick in. I think it's something we need to think as a nation, how we probably can take this as an advantage.
Fantastic. Bill Okero, your closing remarks?
Oh, you have...
we talked about Zimbabwe and the gold, but you missed out a bit. Yeah,
on gold?
The new currency where the president was hailing the ZIG. Yes.
Yes. No, I think the issue,
remarks,
the issue, I agree, the floods is a major concern today in this country. And it's all about preparedness. We have drought is a crisis, no contingency measures. We have floods, it's the same again, no contingency measures. I think it's a major concern, particularly for the roads, because that is where the problem is. Like Northeastern, the only access road in Garissa cut off. It was cut off 3 months ago. It was cut off last year. I mean, the same, 1 kilometer. That links Garissa with Tana River, and that's the main serving the entire region. So I think Kenya and the people who are dealing with roads need to take their work seriously, and the airport also. These things are becoming an embarrassment. When you are doing the same thing all the time and nothing changes.
All right, we need to wind up. Thank you.
We were marooned yesterday when we were saying inshallah. Thank God it didn't rain. But that's a story for another day. We need to do more.
For the airport, I think a task committee will be formed to investigate.
There was one a few months ago.
That's what I'm saying. This is for the rains. That was for the blackout. All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I really appreciate the discussion today. You've been watching, of course, SOKONI here on the Morning Prime. Don't go away. His diary is up next.